The Prince's Motorway, formerly the F6 Southern Freeway, is an important motorway. It links Sydney with the third biggest city in New South Wales, Wollongong. Except, well, it doesn't. Not technically.
The Prince's Motorway ends here, at Waterfall, where it joins up with the Prince's Highway to continue north to Sydney. But here's the thing, the Southern Freeway was never meant to end here. It was actually meant to continue north, going through the Royal National Park, then through suburbs spread out across southern Sydney, before arriving in Sydney's inner CBD at a massive interchange in Ultimo. So, what happened? Today, I'll investigate the history of the Southern Freeway, delve into the complex series of events that led to the freeway's cancellation, expose the many hints that have survived all across southern Sydney that a freeway was ever going to be built here, and explore the newest form of the freeway which recently started construction 70 years after it was first proposed. Welcome to Building Beautifully.
Before I continue, please do consider subscribing if you haven't already. And do be sure to check out the rest of Building Beautifully, your go-to YouTube destination for all things city planning, after the video. Oh, and if you enjoy learning about lost freeways of Sydney, please check out my growing series on the topic. The Prince's Highway was sealed from Sydney to Kiama by 1932, but it was a windy route. It was clear it wouldn't sustain growing traffic between Sydney and Wollongong for long, and so proposals started to float around for an expressway-grade road between the cities. In 1951, the infamous County of Cumberland proposal was released, which officially gazetted a route all the way from Ultimo in inner Sydney to Yulla in southern Wollongong. Needless to say, the Southern Freeway was an ambitious proposal, created in an optimistic time. The world was changing, Sydney was changing, and freeways were seen as the way to build forward, to spur development, to improve lives.
The Southern Freeway would have commenced somewhere here in Ultimo, an inner city suburb that was already pretty built up when the proposal was first made. The suburb would have been completely consumed by a massive interchange between the F6 and the proposed F4 Western Freeway, significantly changing the facade of the suburb today. It wasn't completely unheard of at the time though. The Warringah Freeway, after all, did destroy massive swathes of the lower North Shore in 1968.
The freeway was to then continue south, cutting arbitrarily through Chippendale, before crossing the railway just west of Redfern Station. From there on, it would have cut through Alexandria. It would have arrived here at Huntley Street, before continuing south. Now, here's the interesting part. The entire freeway reservation that I just described, from Ultimo to Alexandria, was removed in 1977. So, what happened? Well, in the 70s, controversy surrounding the Southern Freeway was growing. For example, newspapers reported how Port Hacking High School, further to the south of the reservation I just described, would have lost significant expanses of their playing field were the freeway to be constructed. The federal government was growing increasingly reluctant to build freeways too, which put pressure on state governments. Sydney's section of the Southern Freeway was in danger. Ultimately, in 1977, Premier Neville Wran cancelled the project north of Huntley Street in Alexandria, announcing that pieces of land associated with the project would be released. Now, interestingly, land south of Alexandria was not released from the freeway reservation in 1977, allowing the government to resume construction at any point. But they never did. The Southern Freeway was gradually constructed and opened from Waterfall to Yulla between 1959 and 1987. But it has randomly ended in Waterfall since 1975. Even though land was kept after 1977, none of the originally planned alignment for the Southern Freeway north of Waterfall was ever built. Well, except one part. I'll get to that in a bit. So, let's continue south and find out exactly where the freeway would have gone south of Alexandria had it not been cancelled. The route would have cut through this building on Huntley Street, just north of Sydney Park Road. The route would have then roughly followed the alignment of Burrows Road, consuming the entire road and its many warehouses. It would have then deviated from Burrows Road, cutting through industrial areas of St. Peter's that were already fairly built up by 1977. However, to the south, large sections of Tempe east of the Princes Highway lay empty for years, planned to be used as part of the Southern Freeway. Indeed, large parts of it still remain empty due to those plans.
Here I am at Tempe Recreation Reserve. This reserve would have been completely consumed by the freeway. A massive interchange would have lied here between the F6 Southern Freeway and the F5 Southwestern Freeway. I don't know about you, but I like this more. Now, the Southern Freeway would have then crossed over the Cooks River over here. Now this is where things get a little bit interesting. As I said earlier, the reservation for the Southern Freeway was completely freed up north of Alexandria in 1977. And it was slowly freed up and sold off all the way down south to Tempe, right here, over the decades that followed. But south of Tempe? Well, the reservation is still intact.
Yes, that's right. As of 2022, the reserve for the freeway still appears on planning maps as an SP2 zone, pretty much intact from Arncliffe all the way south to Loftus. The reserve was never freed up, instead kept for public use and recreation in the decades that have followed. As a result of this, there are massive stretches of greenery throughout southern Sydney, clearly hinting that the unbuilt Southern Freeway was going to run here. Of course, they're never actually going to use any of this land to build a freeway. Oh, wait. Don't worry, we'll get to that.
The Southern Freeway would have torn through Cogra Golf Club and also here, Barton Park. In fact, it would have met with the also unbuilt Cooks River County Road here in Barton Park, planned to link nearby Keigmar to Jalora in the west.
Continuing south, it would have cut through this caravan park to the west of Cancellation School, through these houses on Bruce Street, and then to Bay Street. The reservation at Bay Street widens, suggesting an interchange would have been built here. Tony Barker Reserve exists specifically for the freeway. The freeway would have cut through backyards along England Street before passing to the west of Brighton Sands Public School and then through Bicentennial Park. Again, the reserve widens at President Avenue to possibly allow an interchange to be built here. Continuing south, it would have gone through Scarborough Park and several other reserves in Cogra before cutting through these homes on Margaret Street in Ramsgate. After that, it would have torn through Ramsgate and Sans Souci, destroying many homes throughout the suburb. Although many pieces of land do exist throughout the suburb, indicating where the freeway would have run, such as Bonner Park.
Then, the freeway would have finally arrived here, at the Captain Cook Bridge. Remember when I mentioned that one part of the Southern Freeway was built in Sydney? Well, here you go. For years, a ferry ran here, running across the Georges River between Tarrant Point and Sans Souci. To cope with increasing traffic in the area, the Captain Cook Bridge was built and opened in May 1965. Indeed, the bridge was actually going to be part of the Southern Freeway one day. Looking at the bridge, at how wide and majestic it is, it's certainly easy to imagine.
On the northern end of the bridge, massive pieces of land exist to allow the freeway to join up with Rocky Point Road. On the southern end of the bridge, there's massive pieces of land between the lanes of the road, which was to allow the freeway to be slotted into the road. The freeway would have torn through this land, then through this Flower Power car park, built after the freeway was cancelled, before again continuing along pieces of land that still exist to this day. This land is now empty land behind some sports complexes in Sylvania waters. Again, the reservation widens at Port Hacking Road, probably for an interchange. Tearing through Sydney Tourist Park, it would have consumed this massive field on the boulevard, as well as Miranda Park, where it would have passed behind Port Hacking High School, the school which was in the newspaper article I mentioned earlier. It would have then crossed the railway here, just east of Gymea Station. Cutting through some empty land and some houses in Gymea, the freeway would have then joined up with a long stretch of land in Kirrawee, starting at Stonebridge Reserve, then these tennis courts, and then Helena Street Dog Park. This was the end of its massive stretch through suburban Sydney. The reservation then continues a bit further into the Royal National Park. Now, it passes very close to the Princes Highway here in Sutherland, possibly suggesting an interchange. It then goes south, consuming Loftus Oval. Then it widens at Farnell Avenue in Loftus, again probably for an interchange. And then the reservation ends.
Wait a second, what about Loftus to Waterfall, I hear you ask? Well, the remaining home stretch of the Southern Freeway from Loftus to Waterfall was planned to be built through the Royal National Park, to the east of the current Princes Highway. As you can imagine, this was a very controversial matter, given the National Park's significance to Sydney. For example, I love hiking. This is actually where I hiked for the first time, and I can imagine that experience would have been very different had a freeway been running through here.
In 1989, the government announced the section of freeway reservation running through the Royal National Park would be handed back to the park, much to the delight of the public. Although it took them a few years after that to actually come through on their promise, they did hand it back at some point, as the reservation no longer appears on planning maps. After tearing through the national park for 15 kilometers, the freeway would have arrived here, at Waterfall, where we started the video.
Yes, it looks like a motorway here, but it's technically a highway. The motorway starts a bit further south.
From here, it would have continued all the way down south to Wollongong, as the Princes Motorway currently does. In fact, once again, the freeway interchange seems to have been built to allow for the extension north to be neatly slotted in. You can actually see cliff cuttings on satellite view, in line with where the extension may have run.
And so, that's that. Even though the reservation south of Loftus was released, for years, the fact that a reservation existed between Loftus and Arncliffe meant that a freeway could still be built. Well, as it would be, it's no longer a could, but a will. Because the Southern Freeway is being built in Sydney as of 2022. Just not quite in the same way that planners meant for it to be 70 years ago.
In 2005, then Minister for Roads Michael Costa announced that a feasibility study into the F6 extension would occur, given that traffic in the south of Sydney was suffering due to the lack of a freeway. There was some controversy around that. However, there was also significant support, such as from the NRMA. They escalated a campaign for the F6 between St Peters and Heathcote to receive funding, citing how residents continued to be strangled by endless traffic delays. The Labour member from Miranda, Barry Collier, had other plans, insistent the freeway would be constructed over my dead body. Well, despite that, planning continued, with the F6 extension finally announced in 2017, set to be divided into 3 stages, which would roughly follow the Southern Freeway reservation set decades ago in the county of Cumberland. But there was one key difference. Most of the route will be tunneled. That's right, after decades upon decades of inaction on the route, after decades upon decades of the reservation sitting unused, the freeway is finally being built. In a tunnel. Stage 1 of the project, from Arncliffe to President Avenue, started construction in November 2021. It was well underway when I went out to film this video. By the way, Barry Collier is still very much alive. Although the corridor isn't being used for the road itself, a lot of it is being used for construction, such as significant parts of Cogra Golf Course and the Bicentennial Park. Oh, and the tunnel portal with President Avenue does use a bit of the corridor. Now, here's the weird part. The extension will only go to Loftus, before joining up with the Princes Highway there before continuing down to Waterfall. Why is this? Well, when the freeway's plans were revived a few years ago, the government had initially been considering building the freeway above ground through the national park. However, public backlash hit, and it hit hard. So, they quietly scrapped these plans, and decided that a tunnel under the national park between Loftus and Waterfall wouldn't really be worth it. The Loftus to Waterfall section doesn't have that much traffic after all, and it is currently already 4 lanes. Still, you do have to admit it's pretty funny that, in the end, the F6 extension won't even join up with the F6. Brilliant. As it would happen, Stage 2 and 3 of the project, from President Avenue to Loftus, are now in limbo due to the fact that our government is, in debt. Who knows if those stages will ever be built? What's my opinion on the F6 extension? Look, it has potential, and I do definitely agree that areas of southern Sydney are in need of better roads. But without stages 2 and 3 of the project, it's pretty much a glorified on-ramp to the West Connects. You can read more on my views on my website in the top right.
The Southern Freeway was a very bold plan, which would have irrevocably changed the facade of southern Sydney forever. For better or for worse? Well, we'll never know, will we? Instead, its planned route has allowed for kilometres of green space and public land to stretch on throughout southern Sydney. In the end, after all these years, the Southern Freeway is being built in Sydney, tunnelled, in a way completely different to that initially proposed by planners in 1951. For their plans may have been bold, ambitious, but they were destructive. And now, the original plans for the Southern Freeway will forever remain lost to time.
If you like this video, please do consider liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching.